if you want to learn Spanish, you should get lost. That's what I think. Getting lost can be great. First of all, apologies to any YouTube video purists out there. I have already recorded this once in a lovely forest, not driving. Bird song in the background, absolutely wonderful, but I was using the rear camera, and when I checked it all you could see was my chin. So here I am driving to work, asking you to get lost. And what's this got to do with learning Spanish? Well, when I went to Peru, specifically to learn Spanish, I'd done a little bit from a book before I went out, but there were a number of things that I did. I tried to immerse myself. I tried to avoid British-speaking people that I went out with, not in a rude way, but I just tried to expose myself as much as possible to the language. And one thing that I liked to do was to go off wandering around Cusco, which is a beautiful city in the mountains. It's a crazy place, lots of little streets. And I would wander around and go down little side streets on purpose. Places I didn't know. The centre of Cusco is very safe for tourists, so I felt comfortable doing this. I wouldn't advise doing this in a city where there's any particular danger, but Cusco, very, very safe. And I would wander along these little streets and find tiny shops, often little grocery stores or corner shop style places that sold all sorts of things like pasta and tins of food and chocolates and ice creams and things like that. And the benefit there was that I was with nobody English speaking. Very few tourists would ever turn up in these places, and I would be able to sheepishly go in and wander around these very, very tiny shops and have a look at all of the things on the shelves, which in itself was really useful because you could see from the packet what something was, and then I would have a little look at the name of that thing, the list of ingredients, etc., and learn a few words there, pick a few things up, and then eventually, once I'd figured out what I wanted to ask about, I'd be able to approach the shopkeeper and ask very basic questions. Now, I would wait a little bit before doing this. After having read all of the packets and had a little snoop around, I would try, hopefully, if it was a possibility, to listen into a conversation. So before I continue with my story, I haven't turned the camera around for a dramatic effect. I ran out of phone storage. So today is not going well, but actually this mirrors exactly how you should be learning a language. There will be days like this where nothing works. But anyway, back to my shop story. So I'm going to approach the shopkeeper, but first I try and I wait and I hope that another member of the local community, in this case someone from Cusco, would pop in and have a chat with the person at the till. Now this was gold because they would chat about all sorts of things. Either they didn't know the person, or in some cases they were a regular and they knew that person and they would have a good old chat with them, and I would pick up all sorts. You get the tone of the language, the way that they talk to each other, little bits of slang and ways of greeting that are local to a place, and they'll ask for things that you didn't realise existed, things that only exist behind the counter, so that was great as well. So snooping in on those conversations was fab, and that's why I really appreciate and know the value of listening to other people speaking, hence the way I set up my learning course. So I would eventually go up to the shopkeeper and ask a question with the language that I knew at the time, which was very basic. So the sorts of things that I do in my mini lessons, things like quiero or necesito, and I would pretend not to know some of the items that I'd already discovered on the shelves, and then the shopkeeper would come out from behind their desk, show me, and then speak to me a little bit. Sometimes I would understand, sometimes I wouldn't, but those interactions could last a few minutes, and I had that person on my own with no distractions, no fear, no one else there to be able to work through a few things with gestures and trying things out. So it was a really, really valuable way to learn. But other than that, other than wandering into shops and pretending to be stupid, just physically getting lost in a city like Cusco was really important. It allowed me to discover little cafes and restaurants and places, street food vendors, people who sold newspapers. It depends on the place where you are, I suppose, but I had all sorts of little adventures and discussions with people, and I was one of the only people, one of the only tourists in that area doing that. Now, if this fills you with fear, I get it. I totally understand. It can be really scary, and this is what puts a lot of people off learning a language. That fear of getting something wrong, or having to speak in front of someone, them speaking English. Another huge advantage of Cusco was, even though it was a touristy area, these shops I was going into were local shops, and the people there weren't trained for tourism. They didn't necessarily speak English. In most cases they didn't. So that was a huge advantage. So I suppose what I'm saying in general is, if you go somewhere and have an immersive experience, which is not necessary to learn a language, you can definitely learn a language without doing this. But if you're lucky enough to go to a place like Cusco, where I was, and have this opportunity to go and talk to people, this is one of the easiest ways to do it, and it strips away most of the fear. It's very low stakes, there's very little to lose, and there's a likelihood that you'll be the only person there. So I would definitely recommend it. Now, this has been a bit rambly, and I didn't have a script, and I'm just talking about an experience that I've had in Peru, where I learned my Spanish and all of the things that came together to create this map in my head of how the language worked. It's all very important to me, and these experiences shape the way that I teach the language as well. So if you want to know more about that, about my adventures in Peru, not that you might, and how I developed this course, and how I came across the methods and the shortcuts that I use to teach, which are, to be honest, other people have seen these things too. It's just, this is my personal version of how to learn a language, and it's quick, it's no nonsense, there's no grammar terminology, there's no homework, there's no writing, there's no pressure. And I'm really excited about hearing from people who've maybe tried to learn language before and have failed, because especially if you're at my age, around 50, or thinking about retiring, you've got a lot more time and a great opportunity to actually finally make the language stick. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, get in touch, and I'll be happy to talk to you.